I'm going to give you a theology lesson, theologia. Now, this was my original subject many years ago. And I want to tell you the difference between the Russian Church and the Roman Catholic Church. Is the Russian Church familiar? Yes? You know this? Just. Okay. The Roman Catholic Church is governed by one man, the Pope. Under the Pope are the cardinals, under the cardinals the bishops, under the bishops the priests. It's like a big pyramid. And at the moment, it is beginning to shake. It is not working. It's taken 2,000 years to discover this. In Russia and in Greece, the system is horizontal. There are little pyramids. Each pyramid is controlled by a bishop. Under the bishop are priests. Each bishop is independent. They have a relationship, and there is a patriarch who governs that relationship, but he is not like the Pope. So theoretically, the Russian system should work better than the Roman system. The Russian system and the Greek system are the same. Sometimes the patriarch becomes more powerful and becomes like the Pope, and sometimes he becomes less powerful. The same thing is true, incidentally, in Islam, and the same thing is also true in some forms of Hasidic Judaism. So the horizontal model is a model which has been proven to work in certain parts of society. Today, in economics, people are recommending the horizontal model even in Russia. Now, in filmmaking, the horizontal model is essential in practice, even if we use the language of authority, the director, the producer. Disney recognized this very early on. And Disney had wall space around the studio where people were invited, ordinary people were invited to post their drawings, their jokes particularly. And they would collect these jokes and use them in the cartoons, often without crediting the people who made them. So Disney recognized right at the beginning that some of the best work was going to come from people who were not experienced, people who did not have authority to say what is best or what is not best. So what does the director do? Now, I worked for many years in the theatre. I'm sure I've told you this. Very boring. In the theatre, the first time you direct a play, my first play was a Russian play. I didn't direct it, I designed it. It was Gore ot Uma by Gribodayev. Is that correct? What? Gribodayev. Yerov. Again? Griboyedov. Ah, yes, Griboyedov. Yes, very exciting. All about a very eccentric man, a man that people thought was unusual. I didn't understand any of it. Then I directed a play, a horrible play, by Oscar Wilde called Salome, which nobody produces because it is so horrible. I thought I could save it. I was wrong. And then I directed a play called Peter Pan. And in Peter Pan, I started to learn how to direct. So when you start, you say, "Oi, Dmitri, do this." And move here like this. Move 1, 2, 3, and say hello, blah, 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 and then back you go. Okay, and I do this for 20, 30 actors. And 20, 30 actors will be obedient and will all be versions of Tim. And it all looks very pretty because I have this vision in my head, what I want. I have the best thoughts. Your thoughts are rubbish. You are just here as a puppet for my ideas. Yes? Now, this might work for a short time, but Dima is going to get very angry. I have ideas myself. I have ideas. You never listen to me, yes? I'm sorry. Can you do your voice? Can we have it in Russian? No? Anyway, so Dima gets very upset. And this happened. I experienced this. So the second play I did, Peter Pan, someone told me, don't do this, do this. I would say, no, don't do this, do this. And everybody done that. And so they said, no, you have to use positive language. Yes, excellent. But do this. So it's not just about the positive language. You actually have to do something more. And it wasn't until I was directing my third play, which was an opera, that I realized the best thing to do is to sit still and wait. And there'll be a point when somebody does something wonderful. And you say, yes, can I have more of that? I want more. And can I have yes, what you were doing a few minutes ago, brilliant, I want more. And suddenly you think that you have something to offer. And you are going to offer ideas, and you're going to do things for me. And the final production will not exactly be what I imagined. It will be better, because I will be using the ideas and the creativity of my actors. Yeah? We become horizontal. In the end, I have to take responsibility, because I am the director. But I don't have all the ideas. So it's a very strange relationship, but it works better than my telling you what to do. The same thing is true for teaching. As a teacher, do I have all the ideas? No, I don't. I have some ideas, and some ideas which I think work very well, but they work for me. They may not work for you. So in the creative arts particularly, we have to find space for you to express your discoveries. Now, how do we reconcile this freedom with the fact that there are technical issues? For example, is your drawing good enough? This we can measure. Is your drawing good enough? Maybe. So we divide the artistic input, the creative input, from the technical input. Yes, brilliant. Can we have more of this small technical point? Yeah? And we can add technical points as a way to criticize and change. Our technical points become maybe negative, maybe positive. Maybe with a technical point we can help solve a problem that you have been struggling with for many weeks. A technical point. In animation, I think there are, I was looking at it this morning, and where did I put it? Here we are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes. I think there are only 9 technical problems, unlike Ollie Johnston and Frank Thomas. They think there are 12 technical problems. I think there are 9. And what I wanted to do today, because I thought this would make more sense. I was drawing in the car, and I'm sorry. The technical problems that I think the 12 points reduced to 9 points are, and you should write these down perhaps. Squash and stretch, but limited. Don't get too excited by it, because it is a dangerous indulgence. It is something that maybe is too much fun. Somebody is experimenting with pointillism. I didn't know that Georges Seurat lived next door. Isn't Georges Seurat splendid? We could do a Seurat painting in 3D, I think. We were talking yesterday. Were we talking yesterday? I think we were talking yesterday about deep canvas, which I think is the greatest invention technically of the Disney studios, and they haven't produced it on the internet or for anybody else. And I've challenged Misha to find me a version of deep canvas, but I don't think we're going to be able to. But maybe we can invent one ourselves. The idea, I will explain again, is that, so imagine a background. The background in animation always seems very flat and boring. Even if you use a 3D space and you animate characters in a 3D space, the background always seems a bit flat and boring because you've pasted a flat color painting onto a 3D background, or it is a flat painting. What Disney did in Tarzan was to create a form of painting which could be repainted with every single frame. So as the characters move through the background, through the 3D background, the paint strokes are new in every single frame. And all the paint strokes, instead of being applied to the sides of the trees, are applied facing the camera. So here's my paint stroke in Anastasia. It's on the side of the building. Here is my paint stroke in Deep Canvas. It's facing the camera. Think about it. Okay, when you are painting a painting, and you're painting, let's say, a landscape, all your paint strokes are facing you. They're not in perspective. And one of the reasons the canvas looks so exciting is because all the paint strokes are facing you. Even if you are drawing in perspective, the paint strokes are still facing you. So that's what we want. We want the paint strokes to face this way, even if you are in perspective. So you have 1, 2, 3, and you layer it. So if you're going to paint a picture of this room, we would do a canvas which has probably got a grey colour, and then we would start adding highlights and shadows. There would be a system that we would follow. You've all done painting. So you would follow a system. You would go from the general and gradually move into the specific. This is called a sort of painterly approach. Often when we draw, we go from the specific to the general because we are obsessed with features. But when we paint, and in fact, even drawing, we should go from the general to the specific. But when we are painting, we have to go from the general to the specific. And so imagine you have a general wash of color. That would be your background. And then you start adding these specific details, different washes, which are layered into the camera separately for every single frame. And this gives you the vibrancy. If you haven't looked at it, you should look at the scene in Tarzan. In fact, we could probably find it here. Let's just see if we can, 1 second. Because we've mentioned it so often. Right, let's go on. So, squash and stretch. Use it in a limited way. Arcs, absolutely essential. You can spend about 6 months mastering how to draw in arcs. How to draw, as I said, if you're thinking in physics, how to draw in vectors. If you can't draw that. If you can't draw that, you just have to practice, okay? Most of us cheat. For about 20 years, I drew that. You have to draw that, okay? Do you see that? Can you draw that? Right, draw it. Start learning how to draw it. Don't draw that. This is easy. That is easy. That is hard, okay? Can you practice? I suggested, should we do this to the camera? So that is the drawing that is hard. In perfect perspective. Can you get that drawing to work? Because if you can, any animation, any drawn animation is going to work. It's then a matter of, so if I'm moving my hand from here to here, in fact, I'm very rarely going to be drawing that position. I will probably be drawing, if it's going in that direction, my hand is going to be lagging a little bit. If I'm going very fast, my hand will move in that position. But we want to know that you can draw that. We want to know that if you absolutely have to draw it, it is possible to draw. Of course, we can cheat. So start by cheating. Take a photograph, trace it, find out what it should look like. Then see if you can improve it, because your drawing is going to always be better than the rotoscope. If you want to look at the difference between bad rotoscoping and good drawing, have a look at some of the scenes in Anastasia. There's a scene where Anastasia and the boy, I can't remember what his name is, Dmitri, are in a railway carriage and they're talking. And almost every single second of it is rotoscoped. And the hands are dreadful. They're in positions which you know are right, but they don't feel interesting. So rotoscope some hands moving around. Look at somebody talking. Make sure they're talking with their hands as well. So try and find an Italian person. And they would, and see what happens to people's hands as they do this sort of gesture. Photograph it. Put it onto Toon Boom. Copy it frame by frame and see what happens. Then my recommendation, and this is what I was saying to you the other day, take maybe frame 1, frame 5, frame 7, frame 5, 1, frame 5, yeah. So take frame 1 and frame 5. Then you draw frame 3 between the two. It will be different to the rotoscope. It will be better. Then you can take frame 5 out, go to frame 7, and you draw frame 5. It will be better than the rotoscope. And gradually you can replace the rotoscope, and you'll be amazed how much better, how much more interesting is your drawing. We don't have a pen, but we need to think of a character. When we are drawing, we need to think of a character on many different levels. If you remember my lady who is dancing, every part of her is a different bit of animation. So the feet are animated separately to the rest of the body. I can do a rough pass and animate everything all at once. But when I want to do the details, I'm animating things separately. Now, some of the things I'm doing pose to pose. Many of the details I'm simply animating in a follow-through. You cannot animate hair really on a pose to pose. You have to follow it through, frame by frame. And it's more interesting. But the big gestures you need to be controlled. I need to know that when I move from this desk to this desk here, So I know that on frame 20 I need to be here. On frame 1 I need to be here. So that's quite quick. That's controlled by pose to pose. The first one, squash and stretch, limited. The second one, arcs, essential. And with arcs, you want to think of pose to pose or straight ahead animation. So those two things go together. That's number 3. Pose to pose or straight ahead animation. And it's never one or the other. It's always a mixture. Even when you are doing a walk, we start with the hips, we put in the legs, and then later we put in the hands. And I think sometimes the hands are better done in working on a straight ahead sort of animation. Remember, I suggested one great way to do a walk is to take the whole walk cycle, double it, and then put the hands in on your double walk cycle. Or take a whole walk cycle, halve it, and put the hands in. So you've got 2 hand swings in one walk step. If the hands are going at the same rate as the feet, it can be a little bit boring. If you are doing animation, there's no reason why your animated characters should be moving according to realistic conventions. They can move according to whatever convention you can draw. The legs can go anywhere. Remember the Goofy walk, where the foot is backwards for 1 frame, 2 frames actually. Brilliant. You don't need to be realistic. So, number 4. Number 4 is 3 things. So I'm combining 3 of Ollie Johnson's and Frank Thomas's 12 principles. Staging, appeal, and solid drawing. Those 3 all together. What does it mean? It means that you have to be thinking like your audience. That's all. You have to be imagining how the audience would respond to your drawing or to your 3D cartoon, whatever. If you are seeing something for the first time, in the book by Kazantzakis, Zorba the Greek, we can't, okay. Okay, can we look at it here? Because this will show you, it should show you enormous depth of color. So this is the 3D background. And he's moving through the jungle. There we are. The 2D character drawn over the 3D environment. That's it. It's worth, if you want some homework for this evening, get hold of a copy of Tarzan and just watch it. There's about 10 of these shots in the film, and some of them are breathtakingly beautiful. And they show you what can be done, but it's very expensive. It was very expensive. I don't think it needs to be so expensive. But it's the idea of defining your own reality. This isn't real life. This is real life as we imagine it in a painting. So I see no reason why you couldn't, in fact, imagine painting a Picasso painting using this technique and moving through it. Maybe then at least we would understand a lot more about the painterly aspects of Picasso. Of course, once we move through a Picasso painting, The girl who has 3 eyes would actually have 2, because we would be moving. We wouldn't need to have the 3 eyes. But we would have other crazy changes, because the second aspect of cubism is breaking up space. And that would happen whether we were moving round an object or not. Breaking up space and thinking of different planes painted in a different way. So, 3 parts. Staging. Staging is about being able to read your character clearly against the background, being able to understand what is happening. Disney was obsessed with being able to see a character in silhouette. So if you look at all the Mickey Mouse films, the character is always standing like this. You can always see 2 hands, you can always see what the leg's doing. It's very clearly staged. I'm not convinced we need to be so precise. We can group characters in silhouette, and they will still read clearly. There's a great chapter towards the end of The Illusion of Life by Thomas and Johnston. I can't remember which one it is who animated this, but there's a scene in Robin Hood where some children are running over a hill towards the camera. And in order to animate these children, they're all little bunnies and hedgehogs and mice. In order to animate these children, the animator animated an explosion first, and then put all the hands and legs in to fit the dynamics of an explosion. So the children seemed to explode over the horizon as they came over the hill. And he explained this is what he did. So he wasn't animating a clear silhouette, he was animating an explosion that just happened to be children. And it's a very effective scene. There's a lot in Robin Hood that's very good. There's a lot in Robin Hood which is very bad. But Robin Hood was the film where I think the 9 old men, or whoever remained of the 9 old men, defined what it was that they were doing. They started to think about teaching younger animators. And so they were going back through the Disney archive, and they were finding, for example, the dance from Snow White. You can find this on the internet, I'm afraid. Just look it up. All the repeated scenes which are in Robin Hood, which have been taken from other films. There's a dance in the forest that Maid Marian has with the Merry Men, which is actually the same dance that Snow White has with the 7 Dwarves. Exactly the same movements. So it's not the same, it's not a tracing, because the characters are different. But what it is a copy of the timing. So presumably also the spacing of the drawings. There's a scene where you can see her clapping, and that is clapping exactly on the beat that Snow White is clapping, and it's in fact framed in exactly the same way. There's a scene where the friar Little John is dancing, and Little John is basically Baloo. Little John is dancing with a chicken, and they do exactly the same dance that Baloo does with the Monkey King, King Louis. And it just goes on and on and on. There are so many copies. But why did this happen? This happened because the Disney animators were going back through the archive, looking at the original material and saying, wow, this is good. We don't need to get another dance in live action because we have the analysis of the timing. We can just use this. And in fact, the design, the layout of the scene is still perfect. So why not reproduce it? There's also in Robin Hood, there's a scene where the sheriff is walking towards you and he's got a sort of jaunty walk. It's a beautiful walk. Walking this way, which is what we've been talking about, is one thing. Walking towards you is quite another, because you've got to think about the perspective. Even if you're walking on the spot, you're still thinking about the foot coming in perspective down, and then you're thinking about the weight moving around here. It's a wonderful thing to do with the hands. Whoever animated that, I forget who now, was so pleased with it, they used it twice in the same film. Literally, it is used twice for two completely different scenes. If you've got something good, why not use it? And most people watching the film wouldn't notice all these copies. If you're afraid of copies, I can promise you that they exist in most films. In 101 Dalmatians, you know you've got all those dogs, all those little puppies. Those little puppies, people didn't draw so many puppies. They drew about 6 puppies and copied them. One of the reasons 101 Dalmatians looks strange, or looks different to earlier Disney films, is because the animators Xeroxed, photocopied their original drawings directly onto the acetate and then painted them. So an entire department, the tracing department, lost its job overnight with the Xerox machine. Disney didn't like the Xerox machine. The animators loved it. Any idea why? What does it do? What does it preserve? So if somebody's tracing your drawings, do we see your drawings on the screen? Or whichever, who? So you are names. Sorry, again. Sophia, Katia. So Katia is tracing Sophia's drawing. Katia does beautiful tracing. You're not paid as much as Sophia. Sorry, you didn't know that, did you? Right. So Katia is tracing Sophia's drawing. Sophia does beautiful drawings. Do you ever see Sophia's drawings? You are just a person in the cinema. You don't. You only see Katia's drawings. You never see how beautifully Sophia draws. You only see the lovely, clean lines that Katia produces. Clean, perfect, no squiggles. You don't see the way you don't see the way Katia has made up the figure. You don't see the circles, and you don't see the hard work. When you photocopy the original drawings, now, I'm sorry, Katia, you are no longer wanted. I'm so sorry. Your job is over. In fact, one or two Katias remained because they said, oh, but the Xerox machine doesn't work perfectly. We may need a few people to tidy up things. And maybe we want to put some red ink here and there. And they did. So a few people remained, but Katia, I'm afraid, did not. I'm so sorry. And Katia's lines, it's Katia's drawings that we all loved. In Sleeping Beauty, in Cinderella. You remember Cinderella? You worked so hard on Cinderella day and night, and we paid you very little. I'm sorry. So Katia spent her life dedicated to drawing Sophia's lines. Sophia's work we never see. Katia's work we see until the end of Sleeping Beauty. And your name? Eleni. Yes, exactly. Eleni. So Eleni has spent her life painting. You turn the acetate over, and so you paint on the back of what Katia has drawn. And you have to be very careful that you don't smudge Katia's ink. And sometimes, in Sleeping Beauty, Katia was so good because she used to draw things in different colors. sometimes about 20 colors on one acetate, on one cell. Unbelievably beautiful drawing. So the eyes were drawn in black, and the head was drawn in a sort of brown, and the costume was drawn in a pink line, and you do a flesh color for the face, you do white under the eyes, you do a beautiful red dress with a pink outline. Just wonderful. And it's all because of Katya's brilliant tracing. And nobody sees what Sophia's been doing until the Xerox process. The Xerox process, Eleni still has her job. Eleni never thought she was very important. Katya thought she was important. Katya no longer has the job. Now you have the job, and you can paint on the back of Sophia's original drawings. Wow, Sophia is happy because you can see how much hard work she's been doing. You are happy because you still have a job. Katya, what are you going to do? Nobody wants you, I'm so sorry. You go round to another company, you say, can I have a job? Oh, we've just got a Xerox machine. What are you going to do? I could paint. Now what happens to Katya is wonderful. Because, of course, Sophia and Eleni, Eleni, you exist. Sophia, I'm afraid you don't exist. Sophia, you are called Nikolai. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Because there were no women doing animation in Disney at this period. The women started because Katya lost her job, and she said, oh, I'm as good a person as Nikolai. I could do animation. I've been doing it for my life. You have indeed. And you went to other studios and you started animating. One of the first great women animators is a lady called Tissa David. And she animated for Richard Williams in a film called Raggedy Ann and Andy. You have to look very hard for Tissa David's work. But it is unbelievably sensitive, and she's got a wonderful line. And she's very clever at breaking the rules and imposing new rules for the drawing. In Raggedy Ann and Andy, which is well worth looking for, the two main characters are dolls. And one of the things that she said is she just wanted to have little black circles for the eyes. She didn't want pupils as well. She didn't want pupils and irises and the white of the eye, so just one thing. She wanted the designs to be quite simple. And the film is more interesting because of the patterns and the complexity of the patterns rather than the complexity of this naturalistic drawing. So brilliant. So in fact, Katya does have life after Disney, but you had to work very hard to create it. And now some of the greatest animators in the world are women, obviously. Why anybody would think that we're going to have a better life by excluding half the population. It's rather like education. I want to have the best possible school. I only want boys. Ridiculous. I'm going to have the best possible. I'm going to have the best possible school. I only want girls in my school. Again, ridiculous. You're excluding half the population. The argument, which is still put forward, is that girls and boys work differently, which is probably true. But if we want excellence, we need to get excellence from everybody, which means we need to use boys to do the painting, girls to do the animating. We need to use women directors, whatever. These ideas that men and women have specific roles, maybe this is a bad idea. There is a reason why production companies are reluctant to employ women. Any idea? A practical reason. So I have a little studio, and I'm about to employ people. I might pause before I employ Sophia, although her drawing is excellent. Why might I pause? Why might I consider there's an economic problem employing Sophia rather than Dima? And we have to solve this economic problem. What might Sophia do in the next 5 or 6 years? And so Grisha, yes. You might take time off work. I might have given you a wonderful training in my work, and then suddenly you go and you have Grisha. More than that, in some countries I have to continue paying you while you were not working for me. I happen to think that's a good thing, but if I don't have a lot of money, I'm going to be cautious. Dima, on the other hand, is probably not going to become pregnant. Well, we never know. We never know. We never know. So you have to think about these things. The economics and the problems of how you employ people, these impact on the studio work in animation. So you can answer a lot of the questions about Disney by looking at the economic experience. The first 4 Disney films, Bambi, Snow White, Pinocchio, Fantasia, were groundbreaking. And the moment you look at those films, you know there's a huge amount of money and time that has gone into each film. The next film, Dumbo, it doesn't look as if it's had as much money and time in it. And the film after that, we're into the Second World War, but once we come back from the Second World War in Cinderella, it all looks a bit cheap. One reason for that is that the Disney studio had a big strike, and the Disney animators refused to work in the conditions that they were, in the conditions that were imposed on them. And one of the conditions, of course, was that Katia was not paid enough money. And Nikolai had all the work, and Sophia had none. And of course, Eleni had to work night and day as we got to the end of the film, whereas at the beginning of the film there wasn't very much work for you. The only way the studio managed to keep you employed was by having 2 or 3 films running at the same time. Today, there are animation houses that specialize in particular things. When I first got involved in professional animation, I worked for a company called Wicked Witch Limited, and I did exactly what you do. I only painted. I spent a lot of time painting shadows and painting large areas of yellow for some really awful adverts. And at about that time, people had started experimenting with computer graphics, and advertising companies came to our facility. It wasn't really an animation house, and they said, look, it costs £5,000 for 3 seconds of computer animation. Could you do it with pencils? Cheaper? And we said, absolutely we can. Absolutely. And so we did some animated adverts which look like computer graphics, and they were basically done with colored pencils on frosted cells. So we sprayed a sort of frost, a bumpy surface onto the acetate. Then we cleaned most of the acetate, and we drew on the bumpy surface with colored pencils. we photographed the artwork with a type of blur, so the colored pencils looked like a glow. And there was a second drawing which was white, which looked like drawing in light. So it looked like these rays of light in the middle of a blue water. These were adverts for the water board, and we were trying to sell water. And I remember very clearly drawing fish at this period, and they looked like animated fish, or they looked like computer-drawn fish, but they weren't. They were hand-drawn, but they were cheaper. At about the same time, we did a huge amount of drawings mixing animation and live action, and because that became extremely desirable. And in fact, after I did quite a lot of adverts mixing animation and live action, I thought that I was an authority on this. One of the things about mixing animation and live action is that you have to stop thinking about drawing 12 frames per second and photographing each frame twice. If you have live action, that is moving, whether you like it or not, at 24 frames per second. So you have to draw 24 frames per second. Your shadows change every 24th of a second. And the shadows have to be filmed on a blur. Today we can do it all in the computer. Very, very easy. But in those days, it was much harder. It was quite a lot of hard work. But again, the thing that defined the work that we did was economics. I also did quite a lot of work at the beginning for science programs. And I did a huge number of scenes of molecules moving from one place to another, and it was very boring. And so one reason I quite like drawing balls is because I got used to it at a very early age. I was drawing molecules almost every day. And molecules don't do a slow in and slow out. Everything has to be a consistent pace. So there's none of this Disney slow in, slow out. Everything is moving in a robotic way. And again, if you want to see what that's like, just do it. So the 3 points. First of all, the silhouette and being able to read a drawing. You don't necessarily need to have the straightforward Disney silhouette. Secondly, you might be able to tell your story convincingly with sound or with color. There's so many television programs now which are dominated by sound. Andy and something or other with these big teeth. Have you seen that? It's a little bit like Futurama. It's a new version of Futurama. It's better drawn than some of the modern cartoons, but it's still not terribly good. But it's dominated by its soundtrack. Futurama, The Simpsons, what's the one? Family Guy. Family Guy has some great animation, but really most of it is about the dialogue. Family Guy actually has some very good drawing in it. And the designer of many of the characters and the person who produces the voice for many of the characters, what is his name? He also sings brilliantly. I forget his name. Seth MacFarlane. Simply brilliant person. He designed the characters in a way that I would recommend that you design characters. If you want to design characters, start thinking about removing one principal ingredient. So, or adding something new. So with the baby, what's the baby's name? Stewie. Stewie, he gave him a completely improbable head. shape. His head is shaped like a rugby ball or an American football. It's the wrong shape. So when he turns to the side, it does look a bit odd, but he very rarely turns to the side. He's almost always looked like this, if you look at him. There are jokes in The Simpsons and in Family Guy about the fact they've only got 4 digits. There's a famous Simpsons joke about counting. How do you count up to 10? When I'm designing characters, even if I'm designing characters which are supposedly more realistic, I try to think of constraints. I try to impose rules on my characters. So, for example, which come from the behavior of the character, or from the way that character thinks. So I have in one film, I have a character who is very manipulative and but not very good. So I've decided he's about this high. So once I've made him very small, I want to give him, because he's so arrogant, I want to give him a lot of big clothes. So he has a very big coat with a patchwork design on it. So it's very difficult to animate. I've given him an extra digit on each hand, so he has 5 fingers as opposed to 4. He has glasses, but when he takes his glasses off, the eyes come off at the same time. So the eyes are linked to the glasses. The eyes are not on the face, which I thought was a nice touch. I've got another character. So each character has a particular shape. This is something I learnt from Aladdin. If you look at the characters in Aladdin, each character, even if you practically close your eyes, you can tell which character it is. The Sultan is just a little white ball. The magician, Jafar, is a letter T. And everything about Jafar's mouth is extraordinary. We saw yesterday, in that scene from Beauty and the Beast. Did I show you that? The opening scene of Beauty and the Beast? This man here, his mouth is far too small, actually, to work. The jaw would actually have to come out here. And the same thing with Jafar. The mouth simply doesn't work. You have to cheat it. And that's great fun. The genie is basically an inverted teardrop. He's like a great big pear, but the other way round. And so each character has a distinctive shape. Try to, if you're going to create characters, create them with restrictions and create them with distinctive shapes. The color is less important. That really is my understanding of Disney staging and silhouette. Appeal, I think in the 21st century is less important. Your characters may be appealing. They don't need to be appealing, but they do need to be recognizable. So the same thing as staging. Solid drawing, you need to be able to imagine that your character can turn, can move. So that's point 4. Point 5 is anticipation. There is no way that you can avoid anticipation in animation. You can be extreme, as in the sort of Warner Brothers things, where before you start to run. But there's always an element, a backwards move before you move forwards. There is always. And that's what gives you, again, a feeling of solidity and a feeling of life. Pose to pose or follow through, we talked about that. Pose to pose or follow through, there's always a mix, always. With tune boom and harmony, as Dima demonstrated in his piece the other day with the rotoscoping, where you'd put the red lines on the feet. You're always going back and redrawing over the bit you've already drawn. You can do it in a separate layer, which I recommend. Not so good for colouring if you do that. I don't quite know how you flatten all the layers. Can you flatten the layers in the version you've got? You've got the same problem?
The same version.
You put everything on the same... You don't put a separate layer for the...
Yes, I do.
You do? So could you flatten those layers? Could you compress them? No. I don't think I can either. I haven't found out how to do it. I may try and find out if there is a way to do it, because it's useful if you're going to colour things. But I think in terms of the basic drawing, it's wonderful to be able to go back and keep adding layers and keep revising things, and then be able to go back and find your previous version and recognize your previous version was better than the one you've just done. Sorry. Pose to pose and follow through. Yeah, so you want steady action, and you want this sort of gradual movement. Right, the next one, exaggeration. Exaggeration, again, you're going to have an element of exaggeration, but I would prefer to call it caricature, and caricature happens whenever you are drawing something in 2D, in 3D. In 3D, whenever you were drawing something, yes, whenever you were drawing something which was 3D in 2D, and even if you are producing a 3D character in Maya or something, there's going to be an element of caricature. You are never going to be producing perfect realism. Even if you look at Michelangelo's David, or one of Michelangelo's screaming captives, which you've got at the end of the corridor, that is not realistic. That is an artist's understanding of realism. There is an element of exaggeration, even from the greatest artists. With animation, you just have to recognize that exaggeration is there both in the drawing and in the way that drawing moves. You've got two elements to your art. Then I would add timing. Timing is absolutely essential. You cannot avoid it. And do your timing before you do your animation. In the first studios I worked in, there were people walking around the place with stopwatches. Today it's unnecessary. Today we have people walking around the place with cameras. And people are constantly filming themselves and then looking at themselves. So they're trying, particularly if you look at some of the extra sequences in films like Frozen, you will see animators doing the actions that the cartoon characters are going to do. They're trying to get the timing, and they're using themselves as a tool. And why not? The timing must precede the drawing. So the timing is something you can work at as you storyboard. You can't do it after the drawing. You can't re-time animation, really. It just doesn't work. And if you get too obsessed with the drawing and you haven't thought about the timing, then you've got lots of beautiful drawings that do, what was that? I hadn't thought of the timing. Oh. So you then start holding the drawings for 20 seconds. And, very nice drawings. Very nice drawings. They're not really animating. So think of the timing first. So if I'm going to yawn, what do? I've got my yawn. I want to emphasize that, so maybe I bring up an arm. There's quite a lot of animation details in that. The arm is coming up here. I was doing a bit of a stretch. We've got mouth doing noise and shape. The yawn is a wonderful thing to practice on. So timing. Your timing is dictated for you in most filming because you have a soundtrack already. The soundtrack comes first. You animate to the soundtrack. If you have music, when I come back in February, we will look at how to animate with music because it's, I think it's probably easier. It tends to occur as one of the final lessons in an animation course, so I'm going to put it at the beginning. Because the music will give you a beat, a rhythm. And my approach to music is very simple. I'm not a very good musician, though I understand music. I can read music. Is anybody here a musician? Do you play any instruments? Yes, Sophia. What do you play? Yeah. So we've got our musical notation, and we divide it into bars, yes? Where is the beat? Where's the most important beat in a bar?
I just don't know how to explain it.
So I've got 4 beats in a bar. Bom, 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 bom. So I've got 4 crotchets here, and then 4 crotchets here, and I've got a quaver and some other bits and pieces here. Which of these 4 crotchets, there's 8 crotchets here, okay? 2 groups of 4. Which ones get the real emphasis? In each bar. Yes, that's it. So if you look at music, the first beat in every bar is going to be the key beat. Okay? But you will hear that, even if you don't know it musically, even if you can't analyze it on a score, you will hear it. So, in Toon Boom, import your music. And then look to see where the spikes are. That's going to be quite a good guide. Listen to it. You should be able to find the first beat of each bar, and it's going to be rhythmical. So maybe it's going to occur every 50 frames. It's going to be in the same place. If you get it slightly out, you've gone wrong. On that beat, when you've worked it out, I put an X on my Toon Boom, and I leave that X for a little bit of time, so I can see it. And then I put another X in the next 50 bars, the next 50 frames, and then I put another X in the next 50 frames, and so on. So I know that that's where my beat is, my first beat. I did a piece of animation with 2 children throwing a ball, and the ball needs to be caught on the beat. X marks the spot. Even with that, I've got quite a lot of leeway between the ball coming down, so the ball doesn't have to be moving in exactly the same path each time, though it can. I can also then, once I've got that beat, I can dance with it, because I know my foot is going to go down on that beat. If I've got 4 notes, actually if I've got 3 notes and I'm waltzing, my foot will go bom, so we go bom, bom, so what is it? Bom, 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 or something. Oh, please don't film me waltzing. It's really bad. Do you do it? Have you done it? you should try. It's really good for an animator because you understand this horror of making sure that you're moving backwards at that point or forwards. But you've got to beat. You've got to hit that beat. And it's the first beat in the bar, which bum, 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 and so on. You've got to get that beat right. Okay? But you've got an X to mark the spot. So you don't have to worry about your feet. You just worry about finding the X. And then you can sketch. You get that foot put in first, and everything else is going to follow. I will structure some videos while I'm at home so that when we come back, I can show you these very simply. And then I think we will all animate a little bit of music together. If you can find a piece of music you would like to animate, could you select that before February? I will try and be back here in the second week of February. So the second week of February we need to animate. I think we need to make a music video. Okay? So find a piece of music you like. Do you all like music? Do you listen to music? What do you listen to? Yes? Ah, yes. So you've got a beat going all the time. So you should be very good at it. What do you listen to? Sophia? Katya? Yes? Oh, that slows up and speeds down depending on the action. That's a little bit harder. Yes. It is classical music. It is, because it comes from Richard Strauss, from his theories of leitmotifs. Bom, 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 ba-dum, bom, ba-dum. That's what it is. You have music to tell you how to respond to the film, because we're a little bit stupid and we can't really follow all the visuals. I tried looking at somebody last night gave me a new television series and said, look at this tonight. So I went to bed and I had my computer and I thought, I was asleep within about 3 or 4 seconds, but it did have music to try and help me. And I kept waking up and it was still going and there was music and I was thinking, yes, I sort of understand this. The first lesson that Richard Williams gives, and we know that Richard Williams is my God, the first lesson that Richard Williams gives is he says he was talking to Grim Natwick, I think. It's not Ken Harris, I'm sure. I can't remember anyway. He's talking to a famous animator, and he says, gee, what sort of music do you listen to when you're animating? Do you listen to opera, or rock music, or jazz? And he says, what a ridiculous bloody question. I am not clever enough to do 2 things at once. Which is something I've always remembered. I'm not clever, and all of us listen to music as we draw. All of us, without exception. And I started listening to talking books as I was drawing. So I had these voices going on in my head. And if I don't have voices going on in my head, then I put voices in my head. I start thinking of interesting things going on around in my head. And when I heard this thing from Richard Williams, I thought, it's so clever. If I have silence, I can think about what I am drawing, because it is technical. But there's a lot of animation, particularly the work that Katya is doing and Eleni is doing. You're both doing a lot of repetitive work that maybe you don't need so much concentration as Nikolai, Sophia. But Sophia, when you, in your new I am a woman drawing, You also have, there are times when you cannot listen to music because you have to think very carefully. Stop it, I'm just thinking. So I think there are times when we must switch off the music and think, and there are times when we could put the music on and just draw. And I think of another artist called Stanley Spencer. And Stanley Spencer drew these beautiful portraits. And then there's lots of background detail. And someone asked him, he was drawing the background, and there was a lot of noise in his studio. And he says, how do you concentrate with all that noise? And he said, oh, I'm just doing knitting. I'm just doing knitting, like with wool. It doesn't require any thought. And I think those times when I'm doing mechanical routine work, those are the times I really enjoy, and I put the music on. And particularly I do that when I'm in-betweening, or when I'm doing follow-through actions, overlapping actions. I find I don't think very much, and I like music. But when I'm planning my initial animation, that planning stage, so for a day's work, I plan for about 2 hours in the morning. And I have to do that in complete silence. When I plan a lesson, I have to do it in complete silence. Otherwise, it goes everywhere. And I have no idea what I'm going to do. So do be careful about noise. So that's timing. Timing. So the 8th point is to link secondary action and follow-through. Those two things are linked together. They were linked together when we talked about them the other day. Did we do timing? So exaggeration and timing would be, number 8 would be timing, number 7 would be exaggeration. And number 9 is slow in and slow out. Slow in and slow out is essential if you want to make something look alive. It's what happens with a bouncing ball. We demonstrate that with a bouncing ball. It's what happens with an organic object like an arm. It's not what happens with a robotic object. That is moving consistently without slowing up or slowing down. Now, I want to play you another piece of film. I said what I wanted to do today was to play you a film, and I'm going to do it now. I tried playing you a little bit of this film a few weeks ago, and the screen was so bad we couldn't really see, so we probably need to switch off a light, maybe. This film won an Academy Award. It won an Oscar in 1972. It's by Richard Williams. It shows us all the principles of animation. You remember at the end of my last time in Moscow, I showed you a sequence from The Charge of the Light Brigade, which included some rather anti-Russian images from the 19th century. That film was made in 1969, and as a result of that film, people started thinking, yes, we could in fact animate illustrations from old newspapers. We could animate complex things. And this was an attempt to do that by the same studio. So it's a version of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. In England, yesterday was Christmas Day, and today is a day called Boxing Day. Today, traditionally, was the day the servants had free time. And in a large house, the master would give the servants a box of presents, maybe a few tins of meat or something. There would be a box. So I would give you a box. And in fact, I would survive the whole day without my servants. It would be very difficult, but I would manage to do it. Boxing Day, I would do my own washing up on Boxing Day. This tradition developed during the late part of the Victorian period, during the late part of the 19th century. The early part of the 19th century, there was no Christmas. Christmas was a festival which was celebrated in Europe, but not in England, and certainly not in Scotland. And this is a result of the religious wars that took place in England from the 16th century through to the 19th century. At its height during the period after we killed one of the kings, Charles I, we chopped his head off, there were people called Puritans. The Puritans only wore black. They tried not to smile or laugh. It was forbidden to sing songs, and particularly forbidden to sing Christmas carols, Christmas songs. In Scotland, this was very strong, and in Scotland, the celebration in the winter was exactly as in Russia, the celebration of the New Year, which was called Hogmanay. Hogmanay, my father was Scottish, so Hogmanay is celebrated as we hear the New Year being rung. We give people an orange or fruit, a piece of coal, and some money. And these are the representations of what we hope for the new year: warmth, food, and wealth. And we have a tradition of first footing. Do you have this in Russia? First footing? To first foot someone. We want to make sure that the first person who comes through my door on New Year's Day is a good person. So we persuade somebody to go outside the house at about 11:59, and then they will be the first person to come in, and they will first foot us, and they will bring us presents. It's a nice idea. Anyway, round about 1840, Queen Victoria marries Prince Albert. Prince Albert is German. And he brings with him a lot of German traditions. The Christmas tree, the Christmas cake, the Christmas pudding, Father Christmas, Santa Claus. In 1847, I think, the year when A Christmas Carol was first published, was also the year when people sent the first Christmas card. Christmas, we could say, was invented by Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens is extraordinary. He's not just a writer, he has defined a particular period in history. In England, most of the periods in history are defined by the kings and queens. And in Russia too, you think of Tsarist Russia or Soviet Russia, yes? In England, there are one or two periods which are defined by ordinary people. One of them is Dickens. We think of Dickensian London, which is a period at the beginning of the Victorian era. People wearing very tall hats, where we have a great contrast between rich people and poor people. We can think of Oliver Twist. And in fact, in England, when we come to Christmas each year, we will always have Christmas cards which bring to mind the idea of Charles Dickens. So Dickens is still very much alive, even if no one reads the books. The only other person I can think of who's given her name to a period or to a way of doing something is Mrs. Thatcher. So Thatcherite, the Thatcherite period. I can think of very few other people who have given their name to a period in history in England. Dickens does. And Dickens invents Christmas pretty well. And because of this film, because of this story, people think of Christmas not so much as a religious event, but as an event for drinking and partying and being together in community. The term Happy Christmas changed from Happy Christmas to Merry Christmas. You've heard this, haven't you? Merry Christmas. What does Merry Christmas mean? Merry means slightly drunk. A little bit of vodka. Stack and vodka. This is what Charles Dickens is recommending. So Dickens has reinvented Christmas in terms of food and drink and people. He's also added the idea of charity to people who have no money. So Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge, is punished because he is alone, because he doesn't drink, because he doesn't make merry, because he doesn't get involved in parties with other people, and because he doesn't give presents and he doesn't give charity. These are his crimes. Okay? So we can stop this occasionally and try and work out if you follow the things, but also try to look at the animation here. Can you see this clearly? Because it's all full of cross-hatching and you want to see the drawing as well as you possibly can. The sound may be a bit quiet. Oh, we have no sound. Where's our sound? Why do I have no sound? Ah. Can you hear? Only the children at the front are animated. Nice little bit of waltzing here. The candles are animated, the flames are animated, the rest is a... No. Chuck Jones is a Warner Brothers animator. He was responsible for Tweety Pie and for the Roadrunner. So suddenly you think, he is the producer of this film. Very unusual, but he also, with Ken Harris, towards the end of the film, he came in and he did some of the animation. And I want you to see if you can identify what is traditional Warner Brothers animation in this film and what is the animation of Richard Williams. There are one or two hints later in the latter part of the film, which I think are typical Warner Brothers things and maybe a little bit too much. This film only uses the words of Charles Dickens. Other films have done the story of Christmas Carol, and they've used their own words, and they've done it as a musical and sometimes great fun, but this only uses the words of Charles Dickens. One second. This is one single drawing. There's a little bit of animation done over the top of it, but it is just one drawing. Watch it.
In our story, the exception is Ebenezer Scrooge.
There. as a piece of drawing, imagine going over the roofs of London. What a brilliant idea. I think he should have done it a bit slower, but it's a most brilliant piece of drawing. Now, there's a very famous drawing from Fantasia. Do you remember in Fantasia in the scene about the Dance of the Hours, where the alligators are dancing with the hippopotamus? Do you remember that scene? Homework. You look up at the top of a column, and then the alligators spiral down the column, and it's just one drawing. And you've drawn the column on a long piece of paper, looking down from here and looking up from here. So the column in the center is very big, and it comes round very small. And this is a version of what we were talking about the other day with the drawings of the Underground, the Metro, by Roy Naisbitt. You can do amazing things with perspective just simply by a black and white, just simply by a two-dimensional drawing. You can. You just have to think of it. Right.
Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you. Humbug. Christmas a humbug, Uncle? You don't mean that, I'm sure.
Right, the word humbug has two meanings. It's a sweet, about this big, which you stick in your mouth and you suck all day. But it also means rubbish. So here, Scrooge means rubbish. Christmas a humbug, Uncle. The young man is called Fred, and Scrooge is his uncle. And the young man is inviting him to spend Christmas lunch with him. Come and dine with me at Christmas. And Scrooge says, no. What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough. And the nephew says, what reason have you to be morose? What reason have you to be miserable? You are rich enough. Bah, humbug. And Scrooge then says, I wish that everybody who goes around with Merry Christmas on their lips was buried in their own pudding with a stake of holly through their heart. A stake is a thing we put in Dracula, which is about 40 years later. So nice that Georges Seurat is still with us. Dracula was written by a man called Bram Stoker, and he was a theatre director, and he didn't have enough money. Bless you. He didn't have enough money, so he wrote a book about a monster, a vampire, and he also put it on stage, and it made a huge amount of money, and he was very rich. And then he wanted to write another book about 10 years later, and he wrote a book called, do you know the sequel to Dracula? The Mummy, about Egypt. These are not very good books. Not very good books at all, but they made very good Hollywood films. So Scrooge is imagining that you are buried, put in the ground with a stake of holly. Holly is a green bush with little leaves through your heart. Very horrible. And that's the first of Scrooge's nasty things he says. He says a few more nasty things in a few minutes.
The Christmas, and I can't afford to make either people merry. Yes, I know, you'll tell me that many can't go there, and many would rather die. Well, they'd better do that than decrease the surplus population. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Very nice economic explanation for poverty there. He says, Oh, are there no prisons? Are there no poorhouses? Now, if you were poor in the Victorian period at this point, the beginning of the Victorian period, if you couldn't pay for your house, then your whole family would go to the poorhouse. The poorhouse was run by the local church. So the church over there would have a poorhouse, and they would appoint a beadle, a man in overall control. Now, the men would all be in one part of the poorhouse, the women in another, and the children in a third part. You would never meet your family again. That's the end of your family. So you are being punished for being poor. To stay in the poorhouse, to accept the charity of the church, you must work. So even your children must work, and you have basic jobs to do. In return for this work, we will feed you with basic food, which is a little bit like you would get porridge in the morning, cassia, and maybe a sort of porridge with a little bit of meat in the evening. Gruel. The story of Oliver Twist begins famously with an image of the poorhouse. That is one punishment for being poor. It's a punishment. Another one, if you steal something, you go to prison, or you are hanged. So crime is treated very, very swiftly. A third possibility is, you have no money, yes? I'm so sorry. Would you like to borrow £5? Okay. Hello. This lady here, she was responsible for reforming the prison system. So, hello. Would you like £5? You would, wouldn't you? Yes. So you will give me £8 tomorrow. And maybe on Monday, if you don't pay me tomorrow, you can give me £12. And then £15 Tuesday, £20. Soon, you are never going to be able to pay this money. Yes? Compound interest. I'm going to take you to court. I will put you in the debtor's prison. Very unpleasant. You will never be able to pay, and I'm going to put your whole family in the prison. You will never be able to leave the prison, but maybe your daughter or your sister will be able to go out of the prison and have a very small job. So you are in the prison for the rest of your life. You are in prison because you are poor. You are in the poorhouse. I'm afraid, Sophia, you are in prison because you were caught stealing. Katya? And may God have mercy on your soul. We are in a very sad environment where people are punished for being poor. Katya just wanted a chicken. She got caught. Sophia got caught stealing, but by a very nice magistrate who just put her in prison. But that's you for the rest of your life. Dima, of course, just ran out of money because he's an artist. And I'm afraid your whole family is in debt, and there is no way you can survive out of prison. Now, Dickens wrote many books about these four situations, and maybe Dickens is responsible for changing the law. Dickens and this funny lady here. There, that lady there. What is prison for in Russia? What is it for? What is it for? Yes, but what do you do to them? Are you punishing them, or what are you doing?
They just sit there,
Yes?
stay in prison.
Because you don't want them in the rest of the world. Bad people. You stay there. Bad people, like Sophia. Bad people. Do you think we should teach Sophia to be a better person? You would like to teach Sophia to be a better person. Would you like to become a better person? Maybe. Well, this would be called prison reform. And this was a big movement at the end of the 19th century, that prison should be like a university, not a university of crime, but a university for leading a better life. So we might teach Sophia the things that she doesn't know now. We could teach her to read and write, because I'm afraid the reason Sophia had to steal when she was younger is because she didn't know how to read or write. She didn't have an education. Now, oh my goodness, you could have a wonderful life after prison. So a lot of the principles in Dickens are about reforming the society. And we are still in the middle of this debate in England. What do we do with prisoners? Is prison just to keep the bad people out of the community, or is prison something where we should be teaching them and we should be making them into better people? There is a fifth thing that we can do to people who we don't want in the community, and that's called the madhouse. And that's really worrying. Often called bedlam, and I think you have the same word in Russian, bedlam. Bedlam comes from the English asylum in London, which was called Bethlehem. Bedlam. And the signpost above it read Bedlam. But it was the Bethlehem Asylum for the criminally insane. And people used to go to Bedlam to watch mad people doing their strange things. Oh, look, there's somebody who thinks he's Napoleon. Horrible. And in many countries, we've now moved to a point where we consider people who are mad to have a medical problem. And so we treat them as if they're in a hospital. And we try not to keep them caged up. But in Dickens' period, yes, it was like a zoo. And they were often made to perform as if they were in a circus. So there's a lot that needed reform at the time of this story. And there was an idea that if you had money, you should contribute to charity. You should give money to poor people. So these two men are asking for money for poor people. And Scrooge says, well, are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Are there no poorhouses? Oh. And they said, oh, yes, unfortunately there are. He said, oh, good. So I thought something had happened to stop them in their good work. And the two men say, oh, but many people would rather die than go to these places. And Scrooge says, well, then they'd better do that and decrease the surplus population. So our population will reduce, and then we won't have to feed so many people, and our life will be better. It's a very dark view. And remember those lines, because they're going to be quoted back at Scrooge again. So now I think we can just keep watching.
What do you want of me?
You don't believe in me.
I don't. Because you may be an undigested bit of beef, a fragment of an underdone potato.
There's a joke here. When we eat meat in England, we cover it with a sauce called gravy. If we bury somebody in the ground when they are dead, that place is called a grave. So there is a pun on the word gravy and grave. Marley's ghost says, "You don't believe in me," and Scrooge says, well, I don't. You may be indigestion. You may be a problem with my stomach. You may be an undigested bit of meat, a fragment of a potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you. Yes, what I want you to look at here is that. Okay? If you can do that, then you are a great drawer, and that is what you are. That is your ambition. Look at the drawing in this scene. The drawing in this scene is so good, Richard Williams didn't even bother to do lip sync. There is no lip sync here. The words just come out of the dead person's mouth. It's tremendous, but the hand is phenomenal.
The school is not quite deserted. A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there.
One drawing. The boy is Scrooge. What is wrong with the boy is on his own at Christmas. I think the film here makes a mistake because it makes you think that what is wrong with the boy is he's reading a book. Reading books is good. Being on your own at Christmas is not good. That is what Dickens is saying. Now, at this point in the film, as far as I can gather, there was a lot of pressure on Richard Williams to finish the film in time for the screening in America, on American television. And so at this point, the American backers, Ken Harris and Chuck Jones, came in and did a lot of help. And the animation here becomes a little bit more Hollywood. There's a lot more of this movement of the legs. All the way through there, did you notice the wonderful hand animation? The hands. There was one scene where you had the hand like that. It was repeated. There was one hand movement which I think was repeated. But otherwise, there was the most wonderful animation of hands. Now, when I asked Richard Williams whether or not he used film reference for this film, he said he did not. He said there was no film reference used. And the hands were simply drawn because the animators knew how to draw hands. So it is quite a high level of achievement. I think the other thing which sticks out in that film is the perspective. What else do you think is interesting in terms of the staging of this film? Have we gone over time? Are we okay? We're okay. Have we gone over time? Maybe. Oh no, I thought we had another half an hour at least. Maybe another 10 minutes. 10 minutes, half an hour, 10 minutes. We finish about 3:30? We should have 10 minutes. Please, can we have 10 minutes? Yes, okay. Maybe a little bit more. Well, a little bit more if you have lots of questions. I can come to a nice conclusion in 10 minutes, and you can have tea and vodka. I know so little Russian. I have to use the little Russian I can use. Stakan vodki, chashka chai, dobra utra. Ja, hacho jest. So, now what were the things you noticed about the film? So number one, the hands, obviously. Number two, the perspective. But tell me about the perspective. What did you feel about the perspective in this film, the way the scenes are staged?
That maybe there are a lot of, how to say, when a camera is near a character.
Yes, there are a lot of close-ups.
Yes.
In most animated films, the camera is further away. It's quite unusual to have so many close-ups in an animated film. I think that a close-up is quicker to draw. So I'm afraid probably this was an economic decision. But notice all the cross-hatching. There's so much time. This was made in 9 months. 9 months. By a studio with, I think, 8 animators. So you can do the calculations yourself. I've done some of the calculations. I think they're working more than a 12-hour day every day. It's phenomenal, the amount of work in that film. Just simply. And imagine some of that time you would have to spend doing your research before you even start animating. So much work. And, of course, every drawing is traced. Katya still has a job in this film. And when I went to see Richard Williams in 1982, just after he'd finished the film, I was so excited I wrote to him. And he said, come to my studio, come to my studio. And I went to the studio. And the people in the studio gave me lots of paper and said, oh, draw. And he said, draw on this. And he gave me a piece of acetate and said, look at this wonderful pen. It's a wax pen. And this is what Katya would have drawn. She would have traced all the pictures. And then you would do all the cross-hatching. You had a lot of work to do, Katya. You were an animator in your own right. You were animating the shadows and all that stuff. Dima had just done the movement, and Nikolai, of course, ably assisted by Sophia, his inner self, and then you handed your drawings to Elena, and you did the painting on the background, but very, very boring colours. Very boring colours. You know, you had to be very careful because there were many different shades of grey. But a lot of the scenes were literally drawn on paper and photographed on paper, and they were coloured with coloured pens, with felt tip. There's a big variety of animation on here. Do you remember the scene at the beginning where Scrooge is going up the staircase? Every single frame, the backgrounds are drawn on every single piece of paper, and I think they're drawn. I think they're drawn on black paper. I'm not sure. Drawn on black paper in white ink or something. It's something like that. It's beautifully done. The scene before that in the fog, that is all just drawn on paper. The Ghost of Christmas Present, who has the flaming torch. The torch is a separate piece of animation, and the flames in the hearth in the fireplace are separate, and those are superimposed. The ghost is superimposed. Hear me, Ebenezer Scrooge. So there's some camera trickery as well, but much of this is just about the drawing. I want to make a film which is very similar to this. So I'm working on designs for a film which will look a little bit like this. It'll be a little bit brighter, but it will have the same quality of drawing. Unfortunately, I don't think I can do everything in close-up, so it's going to be a little bit more work. But I think because I don't need to use Katia, because I can use Toon Boom, I think I can still do it with 8 people. I will know more when I come back in February because I will have done all the final computation. And I may have some of the storyboards. I will try and bring you some of the storyboards so that you can see how we start a proper film and move on to the finished product here. I can't start filming, of course, until I've got my sound. The sound is the first point. Now, anything else did you notice? Did you notice anything about the lip sync? Lip sync. What did you notice about lip sync? Was it accurate? No. Were there moments where you felt it was accurate? It was quite loose most of the time. There was one scene which stood out as beautifully done. God bless us, everyone. Do you remember? Tiny Tim's lip sync was perfect. Perfect. His voice was Richard Williams' son, Alex Williams, who's an animator in his own right, and he animated the baby lion in The Lion King. He animated, what, is it Pumbaa? No, not Pumbaa. What's the name of the lion? Simba. He animated the young Simba. And he animated, he's done quite a lot. The most recent thing I think he's done that you would see, he redesigned the Patronus for Harry Potter, the Bambi character. He redesigned that rather beautifully. Anything else?
Emotions of all the characters. Not in every film we can see such bright emotions, like terrifying.
But that was partly because you were in close-up, wasn't it? And you could see the eyes doing these things. It was very understated. It was not very Disney. In Disney, you have much bigger emotions, generally because you're further away. Suddenly, if you put characters in close-up, you're doing a different type of film. It's very exciting. To film, to think of how can you do your acting just with your eyes. Eye acting, and it's like a scene from Friends, isn't it? With what's his name, Joey telling somebody how to act. But really, this is a very good example of eye acting. It's eye and hand acting, really, the whole film. And there's only a very few scenes where we have long-distance shots. And those are quite dark as well. There's a lot of snow. How do you do snow? It was one of the first things I was taught. And I'm not sure I ever got it right. The snow is on a cycle. And so rain is easy. Rain just comes down. It's on a cycle as well. But snow has to float, so it's going in that sort of path. And you do lots of them. And what was interesting about this was, so when I first tried to do snow, I did this sort of flat snow. When you get it here, the snow is semi-opaque. It's about 80%. The snowman has a lot of snow, so if you want to practice snow, look at the snowman. The other thing about the snowman is the technique. I showed you at some point a film about a nuclear bomb where all the pictures looked like crayon drawings, and the same technique was used in the snowman. I worked on a film which was made after the snowman called Grandpa, which I've also got on there, but I suspect at the moment it's not going to work because nothing is working for me. But anyway, any questions? And we should probably call this a conclusion. So you have homework to do for me. I want you to take, in fact, I think if I remember correctly, I've got 2 bits of homework that I want you to do. One is to take a character, an animal, maybe a cat, and turn it into a dog, or maybe an elephant and turn it into a pig. Okay? That is one bit of homework.
Can I not one animal to another, but like some sort of evolutionary process?
You can absolutely do an evolutionary process. It is, you are still nevertheless turning a bird into another bird. Gosh, how gruesomely lovely. And I love this. Yes. Can you make it? Can you try to make it fully human at the end? Do you mind? Or something? No, maybe not. No, stay as you are. Stay as you are. But yes. And put in all the cross hatching. Keep those drawings. So that's one. The other thing I wanted you to do, and I'm sure I did I ask you to do a head turn from one side to the... Did I not? Did I not? I'm sure I intended to. Was there an... Oh. You can come in a second. What, would you like another piece of homework, or is the animal moving from one animal to another enough? If you want another piece of homework, you can do a hand or a head. But use your own hand. And if you want, you can cheat and use a piece of film. But do what I was suggesting about the rotoscope. Rotoscope it first, and then go back and in between your rotoscoping and take out the rotoscope drawings. And your animation will be so much better. And see if you can, from drawing here to drawing here, see if you can extend the fingers so the fingers are sort of twice the length, so you get a smear. Yes? See what you can do with smears. We will talk about smears properly in the first lesson I do in February, and we will also look at storyboarding. We will then look at walks on different cycles, 20 frames, 24 frames, 32 frames, and see how the walk changes its quality depending on how long we make it. I also want to look at a 4-frame walk. Is that possible? How few frames do we need to make a walk work? Okay, not frames which are held, frames which are, you're getting 24 frames a second, brum, brum, brum. It's really Vasilisa, the little dog, who will walk on 4. But how do you get those frames? Because our 4 frames, the hint is they're going to have to be different each time you do them. So you're really going to be doing 8-frame walk. You're going to be doing 2 4-frame walks and intercutting them. So otherwise, it will look as if the leg is just flying round. In the same way as how do you animate a clock going round? Just practice. See what happens. See what happens. So 4 frames, frame 1 and frame 4 are going to be the same. So frame 2 and frame 3 are going to be different, but it will look as if you're doing that if you get it in the wrong place. So you've got to put the drawings in different places. You can do it, but it's 2 4-frame walks that you run together. Try it. Try and see how few frames you need to make Vasilisa walk.